I'd like to go ahead now and introduce our second speaker for this evening. Our second speaker is Johanna Bowyer. Johanna is the lead research analyst for the Australian Electricity at the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis. So Johanna's previously worked for CSIRO, Solar Analytics and Suntech, and she has research experience in microgrids, energy tariffs and distribution networks. She has a degree in photovoltaics and solar engineering from UNSW. And together with Tristan Edis, Johanna has co-authored a landmark report released just yesterday on the outlook for coal generation in Australia. And it's worth noting, of course, what we just heard from the ambassador is her report she's about to give you is against the backdrop of the UK government's commitment to be fully out of coal by 2025, and the update from the UK Energy Minister when we had our Global Smart Energy Summit saying that the UK is probably on track to meet October 2024, completely, fully, 100% out of coal. So please welcome Johanna Bowyer.
Thanks, John. I'll just share my screen. Is that all okay?
Excellent, we can see it fine.
Great, thanks. So thanks for having me, John, Smart Energy Council and British High Commission. So I'll be presenting today about the decarbonisation of Australia's electricity system with a focus on coal plant closures. So in Australia, we're in the midst of an energy transition to a low emissions electricity sector. So we've got a lot of challenges along the way. One of them is managing the retirement of our ageing coal fleet. We have 16 coal plants in the national electricity market, which is the East Coast grid. So managing how to phase those out in a smooth manner. We also have to look at, integrating increasing levels of renewable energy and distributed energy resources, delivering efficient transmission and distribution upgrades, and ensuring low prices and high reliability. So there's a lot of things that we have to look at. The focus of the presentation today will be on the coal plant closures. So Tristan Edis of Green Energy Markets and I have done an analysis on how do things look from now until 2025. And so we forecast that to 2025, there's a huge amount of new renewables being installed in the national electricity market. So from 2018 to 2025, the amount of new wind and solar installations is equal in size to the whole of New South Wales electricity consumption. So it's huge. And this huge amount of renewable generation is going to lead to displacement of existing generation and reduction in prices. So as we spoke about before, wind and solar have the lowest operational costs, and their operational cost is much lower than coal and gas plants. This means that they can bid into the national electricity market at a lower price than the coal and gas plants. So they are usually dispatched with priority, and rooftop solar PV systems are always dispatched unless they're export limited. And so all this extra supply from wind and solar is going to lead to displacement of the more expensive coal and gas generators. So in our analysis, we looked from 2018 to 2025 and analysed all the changes over that time. And we found that the growth in demand that we're going to see can be filled by renewables 99% of the time. The gap in Liddell, because Liddell coal plant is closing in 2023 and that's been previously planned, the gap in Liddell can be filled by renewables 98% of the time, and just 2% will be, batteries or gas or something else. And even after the new renewables mostly fills this growth in demand and this Liddell gap, it will then lead to displacement of gas generators because gas is the more expensive, and then it will displace coal generators. And we found that gas is predicted to reduce by 78% from 2018 to 2025. and coal is predicted to reduce by a third. And the other thing renewables does, apart from displacing the coal and gas plants leading to reduction in their output, renewables also results in reduction in prices in the national electricity market, because they can bid in at such a low price because they have free fuel and low operational costs. So prices have been already trending down dramatically. So we saw in 2018, price in the national electricity market was on average $88 per megawatt hour. Then in 2020, it was 50. So a 43% reduction over 1 year, which is huge. And so in our analysis of, the future generation, we used two different scenarios for price. So scenario A is that current prices continue, and scenario B is that prices continue to reduce in line with the increasing renewable generation. So in our scenario A, where prices stay the same out to 2025, we found that 3 coal plants would be unprofitable in 2025. And in our scenario B, where prices reduce in line with increasing renewable generation, we found that 5 coal plants would be unprofitable. So these are quite, quite important findings that show that the cheap influx of new renewables is really going to lead to financial challenges for the coal plants, because they just cannot compete with such cheap technology. And it's very hard for them to ramp down in the middle of the day and back up again, because, in the middle of the day, we have huge amounts of solar generation, and the coal plants are going to struggle to really ramp up and down in line with the changing demand profile. So what does this mean? So we imagine that, so we already know that Liddell is going to exit in 2023, but we imagine that at least 1 more coal plant will exit by 2025, because the financials of the coal plants are looking pretty bad. So if a coal plant does exit, we need to think about what kind of replacement capacity that we need to install to fill any gap in the energy supply that's left by that coal plant exit. And we looked at what happens if Eraring exits, because Eraring is the most expensive generator left. And we saw that if Eraring exits, then during the daytime period, when we have a lot of solar generation, we're going to be largely covered, but we might still need some additional capacity in the evenings. So that could be batteries or pumped hydro or any other kind of technology like that is low capex and dispatchable. And so at the moment, battery storage with 2 hours of storage is the lowest new build generation technology according to AMO. So that's reaching a really good point that for batteries, because it means that they're becoming a cheap, viable solution. Other solutions are demand side participation, so reducing the electricity demand in the NEM when we do have those peak periods, or pumped hydro or green hydrogen. And we've seen a lot of recent announcements by the private sector that are really showing that the transition's happening quickly. We've got a lot of different players trying to put in batteries because they know all this is coming. AGL has recently written down 2.7 billion of the assets of their company and announced that they'd install 2 different batteries at 2 different coal plant sites. And Origin's profits are down 98% from this time last year due to the falling wholesale electricity prices, increasing amounts of competition from renewables. And they have said that they're open to closing Eraring coal plant sooner than expected. And they're also planning to put a 700 megawatt battery at Eraring. And we also have the state governments moving quickly. So New South Wales is planning to put in 12 gigawatts of renewables by 2030, 2 gigawatts of long duration storage. And Victoria is also planning to put in 10 gigawatts of renewables. So we really see the state governments and the private sector moving quickly. because they can see this change is really happening. So what needs to happen, given that, you know, it seems a coal plant closure is likely by 2025? So the market operator AMO currently has their schedule of coal plant closures, and they're saying that Eraring would close in like 2032. However, you know, it looks like a coal plant closure will happen by 2025 or earlier. So we really need to start planning, because it seems like the coal plant closure is going to happen way sooner than we expected, because the coal plants are becoming unprofitable. So yeah, this really needs to be managed to make sure we have the right replacement capacity and the right transmission and distribution infrastructure to cope with, you know, the new renewables that are going in and the new batteries that are going in. And we also need to look at the regulations and policies around this. So right now, the coal plants need to give a 3-year notification to the market operator to let them know that they're going to close. But if we reach these kind of levels of unprofitability in the next few years, it's a question as to, you know, whether that 3-year notification period is going to be adhered to. And there is some financial and legal obligations on them, but they're not very strong. So the failure to comply doesn't really result in much of a consequence. So we really need some kind of policy. Ideally, we have a world in which coal plant closures are locked in well in advance, and we know the dates so that the private sector has time to invest in the replacement capacity that's needed. In the absence of something like that, then we have government underwriting schemes like the New South Wales Electricity Infrastructure Roadmap to put in new replacement capacity before the coal plant closures. And this is also, you know, very helpful. We just need to make sure that it's going in the right place in the case of the coal plant exits. And the Energy Security Board is also undertaking their post-2025 market design. So in that design, they have a thermal plant exit work stream where they're looking at what's our strategy for managing the exits of the coal plants. And they're going to be running their next consultation round in March and giving recommendations in June. So we'll be really following that process closely to see what kind of plan they come up with, or, you know, if they do propose a plan. So thanks everyone for listening. And yeah, this is one part of the transition, is the coal plant closures, and it all seems to be happening sooner than expected. So we need some kind of cohesive plan on this.
Johanna, fantastic. What a great story. So we've got a massive influx of really cheap renewable energy and cheap battery technology. The economics, when you forecast forward, means that, you know, it's probably going to displace up to 5 coal-fired power stations by 2025. An unbelievable story, a massive change to Australia's energy sector and market economics. There's been a lot of chat in the sidebar, but also questions. Also, Johanna, on the questions, I just invite you to go in there and respond to any of those questions that might be applicable. And there's going to be and we'll come back and we'll have a Q&A session at the end with everybody involved. So really fantastic. Thank you very much for that. Let's go now to some of the questions. There's been a lot of interest in gas, and so let's talk about gas to begin with. And the first question is to Johanna from Gareth, and the question, Johanna, is: it seems that renewables displace gas before they displace coal. Is that right?
Yeah, so in our model, we did assume that they displace gas before coal, because gas has higher operational costs than coal, and it usually bids into the market at higher prices because of this. So in periods when there is a lot of renewable generation, then it will displace gas first. However, yeah, and then coal. However, you do see in the evening periods that gas is better at, you know, ramping up when we have lost our sun for the day and, you know, the peak period is happening. Gas can ramp up really quickly to meet that peak. So there is a role for it. It's just a matter of, you know, how much gas do we need to actually meet that peak?
So I think that's really interesting. So renewable energy in the market is going to have a big action anyway in terms of displacing gas, although there is a role for it. I suppose the bigger question then comes from Chris, and maybe Vincent and Peter, you might like to answer this. But then, how do we go about displacing gas, beyond that? I mean, Chris is talking about the East Coast in the next 5 to 10 years. Whereas Johanna's sort of looking out to 2025, maybe post 2025, out to 2030 and beyond. But what's your view? What's our opportunity to displace gas in not just stationary energy, but beyond?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly my view on gas is there are lots of different types of gas. To remember that hydrogen is a gas. So I've just been conscious that we shouldn't necessarily just talk gas, because there are different types. There are non-greenhouse gases. I think in the medium term, this is really about storage of energy, as sort of Chris had identified. Different types of storage. There's obviously lithium ion, which has a certain use case. There's pump storage hydro. There's compressed air. There's a whole range of different storage technologies. And that goes into, firstly, a couple of core questions on gas. Do we have the right market? Is an open question. Should we be having the spot market and the design we have, and should it in fact have capacity elements to it? Secondly, what is the role of hydrogen as itself a peaking opportunity? Green hydrogen as itself a supplier of peaking capacity. So I think there is a real option to replace gas. It will take time. But I think the economics at the moment mean that the design of the market with the retirement of coal is not giving the most effective price signals to find the most effective storage and clean outcomes that the carbon environment necessitates.
Yeah, I suppose if I can just add to that, I mean, I think you keep coming back to this word transition, and it will be a transition. If you have a look at the gas-based model, we went for combined cycle gas turbines because from an operating cost and an efficiency cost, they were the most effective. I think if we're now looking at a system which is dominated by renewables, or increasingly dominated by renewables, what you're looking at is a system that needs peak shaving, for a couple of hours, morning and night when the sun's not shining. How do you meet that demand? So, I think the natural step on from there is open cycle turbines, which are less efficient, but are more responsive, shorter duration operation. So, I think as part of that transition, what you'll see is a move from combined cycle baseload to open cycle peak shaving for gas as part of the energy mix. And then I think what you'll see, moving on from Vince's point, is hydrogen becomes the non-carbon gas that becomes the fuel for those open cycle turbines to meet those peak loads. I think that's a vision that would really work very effectively in meeting demand requirements. What it does, of course, mean is hydrogen costs need to decrease to make that commercially viable.
Sorry, go ahead, Johanna.
Oh, and batteries will increasingly compete with gas because they do play similar roles in that they can ramp up and down quickly, and batteries usually have like 2 to 4 hours storage, so that is pretty well suited to those peak periods in the evening and the morning.
Yeah, Vincent, the start of your answer just reminded me, there's not all gas is the same. And in fact, we're actually starting from a worse proposition than that. And that is that the gas industry has been very successful in marketing gas as natural gas. And you think natural, that sounds good. What it is, it's methane gas that they pump to your house and to your business, to your industry, to your plant. Methane gas is something like 20 to 30 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide emissions. It is really bad. So I think all of us should be calling out, methane gas everywhere. And I think we need to educate people. People are shocked when they hear natural gas is methane gas. We just got to tell that story constantly. Malcolm has come up. He said, how do we stop a gas-led recovery? Well, as you know, that was the federal government's big answer to our COVID-19 downturn. And very pleasingly, I see that someone's put a link to the Department of Industry's gas-led recovery plan, and they're calling for public submissions. You can make a submission. It's there in the chat area for the link. I definitely encourage people to go ahead and do that. Now, perhaps to a broader question, Tenet is asking, both the EU and the UK are talking about carbon border adjustments. What are the threats and opportunities of those sorts of taxes, if you like, carbon taxes? What are the threats and opportunities? So open that to the floor.
Oh, I think certainly from my point of view, it's part of the inaction of the federal government. I mean, it's just a response to inaction. So I think in one sense, it's a threat to those who are not prepared to transition, but it's a fantastic opportunity for those who are keen to transition to continue to take part in global supply chains. This is a global supply chain opportunity. And we are already, even before these carbon borders are being placed, we're having corporate borders. And corporate borders are about identifying their own supply chains. So in one sense, yes, it may well have a significant impact on some companies. Others will adjust very quickly to look at their carbon intensity and maintain access to those supply chains. So I see it as an opportunity for those who embrace the transition.
Look, sorry, go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, no, I endorse exactly that. If I can give you the European perspective, I mean, I think what you've seen over the last decade or two is ever increasing imports against the backdrop of carbon taxes across Europe. Now, in that scenario, you're creating an unfair and distorted market system because you're importing high carbon products and you're penalizing your own manufacturing base for the manufacture of low carbon products. So, that can't exist. Now, it's somewhat complicated in the UK because we've just left the European Union, and a lot of the there is going to be a UK challenge to harmonizing UK policy with European policy. But I think I'd be under no illusions. In Europe, carbon taxes are here to stay. Absolutely will be part of the economic mix and are absolutely there to ensure that the green economy across Europe is sustainable and is a level playing field. And it's absolutely seen in those economic nationalistic terms.
Even if you think about it from a defensive perspective, Australia is a trade exposed medium power, right? We are absolutely at the whims of the global trading system. And so if we are aware that these things are coming, even the US has sort of, hinted at this sort of thing and don't respond to that, then we really leave ourselves massively exposed as an economy. So definite opportunities.
We've already got, I mean, you will have seen BMW announce their buying of aluminium from Celestial in the Middle East because it's a low carbon or no carbon aluminium supplier. Rio and Apple made the same announcement in relation to the Kinamat aluminium smelter for Apple to buy green aluminium coming out of that smelter. So there's a real imperative from corporates, independent of governments, to effect this change.
Yeah, indeed. Chris, I'd like to come to you next. Richard's asking a question, and his question really is around variable pricing. Would variable pricing be helpful for your business, looking at kind of boosting the value of stored battery energy?
We already actually have variable pricing in the wholesale market, so we know we're moving to a 5-minute market shortly, and that's kind of variable, and we operate in the wholesale market. The variable pricing, therefore, is cost driven towards the customer and when they purchase. So we effectively are living in that variable pricing. The only variable, the limit of variable pricing lives in network pricing. So if there was more variability in network pricing, then yes, there would be a major role to play for storage against those prices. But we see very limited price variation in network timing of costs, if you like. But definitely on the wholesale markets, we have lots of variable pricing. So there's, could be a little fix there.
How do we make the offer compelling for a customer, mum and dad, who they're not energy experts, they don't understand about, you know, how the makeup is going to change in the future? How do we kind of make a pitch to them? You know, what's the pitch that's worked in the UK, for example, to get, you know, those customers on board?
So we've basically combined that energy service idea for not only the self-consumption of the solar and battery for the home, but we've also combined that with the wholesale earnings. And we make that easy for the customer. So we give the customers fixed savings over a term. And we're usually looking at a payback now for an energy storage system for a residential customer as about 6 years in Australia. It's a little bit higher in the UK. Obviously, a higher bill customer is going to save quicker. A lower bill customer is going to save less. So I'll just say that. But the combination of the self-consumption and the wholesale earnings going to them can achieve that. Now I can keep the wholesale earnings for myself and make the payback 12 years, but obviously we don't, and we try and incentivize the customer from purchasing the battery.
Johanna, another question for you, and that is, your report's been out, hot off the press, out for about a day and a half. What's the reaction been?
So we got a lot of press from it. So, you know, ABC and Guardian and many publications kind of writing about it. And Origin Energy has made a statement that they'll continue to run Eraring profitably until, you know, situations change in which they may be open to closing it or something along those lines. So yeah, it's gone to Origin, and it's got quite good pickup. So hoping that it leads to a bit more discussions on how we can manage this coal exit in a more cohesive way.
And actually, by shining a light on this, you know, an area that hasn't been, I mean, there's been an absence of national energy policy now for a decade. There's been an absence of national climate policy for a decade, right? So by shining a light on this, what you're actually saying is, actually, it's a wake-up call for everybody, because this is what the market is going to do. These are the outcomes, and actually we need to be planning ahead of that so that we make the transition as cost-free and as disruption-free as possible. And so you're doing a service by telling the story, you know, but you know, unfortunately, you know, some that just hear the message as being the emperor's got no clothes. Well, yeah, someone's got to call it, and that's really what you're doing with the report. So I think that's really, really important. I'd like to now just wrap up by thanking our speakers. Thank you very much to the ambassador. I thought that was fabulous. To Johanna, to Vincent, and to Peter, and also to Chris. Thank you very much. I'd like to once again thank the UK High Commission in Canberra for partnering on this event, and thank the UN Climate Change Conference in the UK 2021. This is an important conversation and debate. I think there has never been a more important time for us collectively to move the world and to influence whatever we can do in our own circles and with our own national government to get the best outcome we can for the planet and for the future economic strength of our country. Thank you, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Smart Energy Conference webinar.